Hey everyone, welcome back to another video with regular RBT. In today's video, I want to continue the RBT Burnout series. And so in today's video, I'll be talking about how I manage RBT Burnout, and I want to give you guys some insight on what I did when I was going through burnout as an RBT. So in my last video, I discussed some of the symptoms, some of the things that I was going through that let me know that I was burnt out as a technician. And so if you haven't seen my last video where I was discussing some questions that you can ask during your RBT interview, then definitely go check out that video. I'll link it here in this video right here. So definitely go check out that video so you can hear about how or what symptoms I was experiencing that let me know that I was experiencing burnout. But again, in this video, I want to talk about how I managed burnout when I was a technician. So let's jump into it. So when I was a technician, I enjoyed every second of it, the highs, the lows. And so when I was at those lows, that was me. That was my first time realizing that I was burnt out in a job. And so, like I said, being a technician is a very demanding job. And so once I started to notice that I was burnt out and it was affecting my work, the first thing that I did is I began to advocate for myself. I began to talk to the people in positions higher than me. And so those people were the BCBAs that were directly supervising me, the clinical director, and the clinics that I worked at were small. So the owners would be on site. And so I was able to discuss these things with the owners of the clinic as well. And so pretty much what I would say when I would talk to my BCBA is I would just let them know, like, hey, feeling very lethargic today. I'm just feeling out of it. Just my mind isn't focused on this. What can I do? So me advocating for myself was very helpful because my direct supervisors would be extremely understanding. And so they would be empathetic and they would discuss these things with me. They would discuss how I was feeling and they would give me some time to kind of like not to just step away from being direct for just like 5 or 10 minutes. I could just step outside and living in Florida, the sun is always shining, and so me kind of like just stepping outside, letting the sun hit my skin a little bit, going for a little walk was always helpful, kind of like to rejuvenate me, to kind of like energize me again. It wasn't like a foolproof plan, like it just helped every single time, but it was just nice to kind of be able to step away. So talking to my direct supervisor and letting them know what I was experiencing was very helpful. So another person that I would talk to, because I work mostly in a clinic, so I had home cases as well, but that was few and far between for me as a technician. And so a lot of my experience is in the clinic. And so in the clinic, the your BCBAs are there, the clinical director is there, and so the outside of my BCBAs, my direct supervisors, I would go talk to the clinical director, and so I would try to set a meeting with them, just to sit down, just to again discuss how I was feeling and what I was experiencing and what can happen, so I can kind of get over how I was feeling, or if there's a way for me to take time off, or like what were my options. But ultimately, it was just to express to them how I was feeling, how burnt out I was feeling, how drained, how tired I was feeling. And that was extremely helpful for the clinical director to know, because now they have a good idea. Well, not necessarily a good idea, but they at least have heard from someone that they're experiencing burnout. And now that thought, that the question starts swirling in their head of how can we alleviate burnout within the clinic. And so, me sitting down, talking to the clinical director, receiving advice from them, and then seeing the changes come about after those conversations. But ultimately, taking the time to sit down with them, sit down with my direct supervisor during supervision, sitting down with the clinical director at a mutual time, just to kind of figure out what my next steps would be. I never wanted to quit. I never wanted to just throw everything away. It was just more, what can I do to alleviate how I'm feeling? How can I get over these feelings of burnout? How can I enrich this experience again. And so sitting down, talking to them really helped with trying to figure out different ways to manage how I was feeling. But the biggest one outside of figuring out how to manage burnout was me telling them that I was experiencing burnout, right? Just so they can hear from me and not just kind of assume like, oh, this person, Ricky, may be burnt out, right? Ricky doesn't seem like himself. I'm coming to them and I'm telling them, hey, this is how I'm feeling, right? And if you want me to be able to give 100%, I need you to understand that I am not at 100%. The next thing that I did to manage burnout was I had to figure out what my purpose was, right? What was my purpose for being in the field? What was my purpose for being a technician? What was my purpose, right? And so for me, it was being a BCBA. I wanted to be a BCBA, and so that was kind of like my main focus. That was my main priority. Is I wanted to finish my master's program. I wanted to begin studying for the exam, but I wanted to pass the exam so I can be a BCBA. That's how I wanted to change my position. I didn't want to go and work in another industry or do this or do that. For me personally, that's what I wanted, and that was my purpose. There's nothing wrong with changing your job, changing your environment, going to a different industry. But for me, that was my purpose. And once I figured that out, that was helpful for me as well, right? And so me figuring out my purpose, me understanding what my purpose is, when I would experience burnout, I would remind myself of my purpose. I would remind myself, this is why I'm doing this. This is why I continue to show up. This is why I want to continue to work with my clients. It's because I want to continue to learn ABA. I want to be able to continue to apply ABA, and I want to one day be a board certified behavior analyst. The next way that I managed RBT burnout is I would set boundaries, right? And so what that looked like for me was there was a certain time that I would stop seeing clients, right? There was a certain time that I went home, right? And that didn't dictate what happened within the clinic, but for me, I had a specific cutoff time, especially when I started studying for the exam. I didn't want to find myself in the clinic every day until closing. I wanted to leave at a specific time so I can go home and have enough time to study for the exam. And so setting those boundaries and sticking to those boundaries. You know, I know a lot of the times we don't control our schedules, but letting the person know that is controlling schedules, that there is a specific cutoff time, right? And letting them know that there are boundaries on your time. And so when my last session was done, I can't remember what time I would end, but when my last session was done, but it usually took me like 45 minutes to get home. And so an hour after my session was done, if I received any text messages or emails, I would respond to them, right? But after that hour, so let's say like I was done at like 4 p.m. From 4 to 5, if I receive any text messages or emails, I'll respond to them. Any phone calls, I'll answer them, so on. But after 5 o'clock, I would tell myself I'm not answering any, unless it's an emergency. But after 5 o'clock, I'm not answering any text messages, phone calls, so on, that were related to work, unless it was an emergency. And so if someone was calling me multiple times back to back, I'm picking up. If they send me multiple text messages back to back, I'm responding. But if it's just one, I may take a look at it. And if it's not an emergency, phone goes back to wherever the phone was before. But that's how I would personally set boundaries with my time, set boundaries with communication. Then I also set boundaries with parents. If parents were like consistently picking up late, I'll let the BCBA know, just so they're aware, and whatever the next steps are, I'll let them handle that. Asking about like outings or stuff like that, if it's not something that I'm comfortable with or it's not something that I'm willing to do, then I'm just not going to do it. That's just me personally, because I just wanted, when I had my weekends, when I had my time off, I wanted to enjoy my time off. And so, but again, that's just me. If people that take advantage of those opportunities to go on outings with the family, so on, continue to take advantage of those opportunities. But for me, I personally didn't take advantage of those opportunities because on the weekends I wanted to spend time with myself. I wanted to spend time with loved ones. I just wanted to kind of just enjoy the weekends for myself. And so that's how I would set boundaries with the parents as well. Is when it came down to like weekend outings, I personally would not make myself available. So another way that I manage RBT burnout is by prioritizing my health. And so I would prioritize my physical health, prioritize my mental health, and prioritize my emotional health. And so how I would prioritize my physical health is by making sure that I was continuing to exercise. No matter how intense or not intense it was, I wanted to continue to make sure that I was exercising, so I was prioritizing my physical health. How I prioritize my mental health is I'm a person that likes to meditate, and so I would take at least 5 minutes before I walk into the clinic, 5 minutes when I leave the clinic, when I'm sitting in my car, to just meditate. I would ride home with the music turned down, just so I can kind of like just ease my mind from listening to the different songs that would be played throughout the day, toys crashing, kids talking, screaming, people talking very loud. Like it's a lot of noise, a lot of things going on within the clinic. And so personally, I would go home and I would turn the music down as I'm driving. It's just no music. It's just me, just kind of just thoughts to myself, I guess. So that's another way that I prioritize my mental health. And then just, again, taking time, spending it with family, taking time, spending it with loved ones. That was very good for my mental health as well. How I prioritize my emotional health is I acknowledge my emotions, right? I acknowledge how I was feeling. And so if I was feeling confused, I was feeling sad, mad, happy, so on, I would acknowledge those things and I would address them. And what it looked like when I addressed them, it just varied based on the day. It varied based on the emotion. But the biggest thing was me being self-aware and me acknowledging how I was feeling. And so that's how I prioritized my emotional health. So the last way that I managed RBT burnout is I sought out advice from other RBTs. I sought out advice from experienced RBTs or even inexperienced RBTs, because everyone comes from different walks of life. And so everyone has a story. Everyone has advice for something at least. And so I would seek out my fellow RBTs and I'll just ask them, or I'll just let them know how I was feeling as well. And they will, a lot of times they'll be like, I'm feeling the same way. And this is how I manage it. This is how I address it. And so that was very helpful as well. It's kind of just talking to other RBTs that you work with. If you're in a clinic or you're in a school, if you're working in homes, then maybe seeking out different groups online, on Facebook, through Reddit, just kind of just seeking out groups that way, especially if you work at home because it's just you. But when I was working in a clinic or I was working in the schools, definitely just kind of talking to the other RBTs, letting them know what you're experiencing, and kind of see what they think about it, right? Seeking out some advice from people that are doing the same line of work as you. And that was very helpful for me because we would find ourselves kind of like just in a circle, kind of just talking amongst ourselves and, just throwing out different tidbits of advice. And it was very helpful, and it was just a good time to kind of just talk to adults, right? Because especially in the clinic, you're spending all of your time with your client. And so having like, I don't know, maybe just like 5 minutes of just talking with an adult, it can be very helpful, right? Well, it was very helpful for me. And so that's another way that I managed RBT burnout, was just taking that time, talking to, talking to your coworkers and just kind of seeing how they're feeling, letting them know how you're feeling, and just kind of just enjoying the conversation for that moment and kind of seeing what advice they have to give, taking as much advice as you can, giving as much advice as you can based on your experiences, and kind of just going from there. And so I hope this video was helpful. These are just some of the ways that I managed RBT burnout. Definitely comment and let me know what are some of the things that you're doing to manage RBT burnout. Please do not forget to subscribe to this channel so you're notified when the next video is available. Definitely leave me a thumbs up if you enjoyed this video. Until next time, I'm out. Peace.